Thank you very much for the introduction. I am Anna Rubinovsky. I'm currently the Datasets Librarian at Swinburne University of Technology, but until last month, I was actually the Ada Booth Librarian at Monash University, which is the title for the subject librarian for Slavic and German studies. And I have with me my colleague Diana today.
Hi, my name's Diana Ramsey, and I am currently the acting subject librarian for Slavic Studies and German Studies. And last year I was the acting Ada Booth librarian as well, while Anna was on secondment.
Yeah, so we thought it would be best to start with a little background of what the Ada Booth Slavic collection actually is, seeing that we will be talking a lot about that today. The Ada Booth Slavic collection is at home at the Sir Louis Matheson Library at Monash University and houses all of the library's Slavic and Eastern European language materials. Until 2011, when the collection was established, they were all housed across the general collections of the library. But we were very lucky to receive in 2008 a very generous bequest from the late Ada Phyllis Booth, who unfortunately passed away. That bequest is managed by a board of trustees, and they fund through the Ada Booth benefaction all collection development as well as the position of the Ada Booth librarian. We are in a very unique position in that regard, that Ada Booth, it is a very interesting story, and I could go on for hours about this. Ada Booth had no Slavic heritage. She just fell in love with communism when she was a student, fell very quickly out of love with it. But when she died, she wanted to contribute to the collection development of that area. And we now focus very strongly on Ukrainian, Soviet, and Russian studies in the 20th and 21st century in our collection development. We will talk today a lot about our achievements with this collection, from making it a niche collection among many of the library's collection to a very prominent and engaged collection. And at its core stands collection development. We couldn't not do any of these things we will be talking about for the rest of the presentation without our collection. So our collection development for the Ada Booth Slavic collection includes physical materials. So a lot of the Slavic and Eastern European languages are still being published in print. But we are increasing our development of electronic resources, both in English and Slavic languages, and we very strongly focus on rare and unique materials that are now housed in the library's special collections, formerly rare books. And we partnered with Eastview last year. Eastview is a very established supplier and service provider for Eastern European resources. They work together with Harvard University and the Library of Congress to develop their Slavic and Eastern European collections. And we established an approval plan for Slavic language materials. This was a very important this was really important for us to do, because until we achieved this agreement with Eastview, most of the time of the Ada Booth librarian was spent selecting individual titles, going through book reviews, going through publisher newsletters, writing down, I want this specific title with this ISBN for that price, and sending it off to our suppliers. Ever since we had this approval plan established, a lot of the time of the Ada Booth librarian was freed up to spend on engagement, outreach, research, and teaching activities. And that has made a huge difference. And I wanted to also highlight the use of our collections has improved very strongly through working together with our suppliers and automating materials. So as you can see, I included the total loans number for our physical collections paid through Ada Booth. And from 2014, very shortly after the collection was established, up to last year, you can see very clearly that the use of our physical collections have increased significantly. The bottom bit that you can see in orange color is of the Ada Booth Slavic collection. So that's the Slavic language materials, while the top part is our English and other European language materials. That is all just physical collections. We have also seen very much increased use of our electronic resources. However, that's a bit more difficult to measure, so we don't have a nice graph for that. So we have one of the leading Slavic studies collections now in Australia, and that has enabled us to do a lot of outreach and engagement with the communities, and we see that as our core achievement. At the heart of all of this is the Ada Booth Research Fellowship Program. We established that in 2018, and we hosted 3 international fellows from Canada, Ukraine, and Italy, who each spent 3 months at Monash University and researched the culture and history of Slavic immigrant communities in Melbourne. Each of them gave a public seminar to the public, and you can see some of one of the images from one of these public lectures there. We are also very lucky that we have secured funding to continue with this fellowship program, and we have already selected 2 international fellows from Ukraine and Canada who hopefully soonish will be able to visit us. As you can imagine, that's all a bit up in the air at the moment, and we're currently investigating if we can find some innovative solutions for them to start the research even if they're not physically present here in Melbourne. I included the link to our library blog if you're interested. There's recordings from those public seminars as well, some more background into the research project. We work very closely together with the Ukrainian Studies Department at Monash University. And in 2018, we partnered together with them to host an international conference called Ukraine and the World. And I will hand over to Deanna to talk more about the conference.
Great, thanks, Anna. So I'll just highlight some things from the conference. One really great thing was the guided tour of an exhibition that showcased the history of Ukraine's rich and distinct culture, as well as how it has been sustained in Ukrainian communities in Australia, despite dispossession and displacement. The exhibition featured items from our rare Ada collection, which included an influential book of Orthodox tales from 1665. So we had quite a wide range of materials in that exhibition. Another highlight was free Oleg Sentov group photos, which is pictured on the slide. So most conference attendees participated in the demonstration of solidarity for the Ukrainian filmmaker, writer, and activist, who was a political prisoner in Russia. And on the day the photo was taken, it marked the 60th day of his hunger strike, protesting the incarceration of all Ukrainian political prisoners in Russia. So he was imprisoned in Russia while on his hunger strike. And lastly, we held a community day to celebrate 70 years of Ukrainian settlement in Australia. Members of the Ukrainian community were invited to the conference, and the papers presented were centered around the present reactions, interpretations, and critiques of Ukrainian politics and culture. So those are just a few of the things that highlight the positive outcomes from the conference we're involved with. So with the Ada Booth collection, we work with many different subject areas, but we thought music would be a good example to highlight the sort of outreach we are doing. So by partnering with the Slavic community members, we have been able to capture their history and experiences and illustrate how cultural minorities in Australia have retained their culture post-migration. As music is an expressive language of culture, collecting things such as songbooks, vinyls, and sheet music written by those community members tells an important story of survival, separation, and assimilation. Donations from the community form an important and unique part of our music collection. So with music being an important area of the Ada Booth collection, we've been working on broadening acquisitions, accessibility, and visibility. We've done this by partnering with Australian Music Centre to develop a cohesive collection of works by or inspired by Australian composers of Slavic and Eastern European heritage. And we are currently the only library that has collected these types of works in a systematic manner. We also closely work with and support the subject librarian for music, Jackie Whelan, who has embedded library workshops and orientation tours for all first-year music students, which teaches them how to access and utilise the library's music collection. So music and music resources have been a really great tool in promoting the Ada Booth collection, and our past collaboration with the School of Music at Monash allowed the Ada Booth benefaction to sponsor a string quartet as part of the music conference, focusing on gender diversity and music making. The quartet performed 2 pieces of music written by women composers from Eastern Europe, whose works are rarely performed in Australia. And I think one of them hadn't been performed before ever, so that was very exciting. Additionally, music resources from the Ada Booth collection have been highlighted at conferences and talks, such as the Conference for the International Association of Music Libraries, Archives and Document Centres last year, and a public talk given by Jackie Whelan as part of Melbourne Rare Books Week. So working as the Ada Booth librarian and with the collection is incredibly fulfilling, as it shows us to support, it allows us, to support meaningful research and discourse through things such as the fellowship and the conference, as well as diversifying acquisitions and providing specialised resources for users. At the core of our achievements is representing marginalised communities and groups and giving them a place where their collective history and culture is visible and accessible. What makes the Ada Booth collection unique is the Slavic Australian resources. So that just refers to resources relating to Slavic diaspora in Australia. And we aim to actively continue growing in this area. Additionally, we are in line with the wider Monash University and Library strategic goals, and we will continue to support research and teaching needs for Monash as well as the broader community. So although the Ada Booth librarian role is central to the collection, it wouldn't be possible without the support from colleagues and other teams at Monash Library, as well as various stakeholders. Lastly, I want to emphasise we're not collecting just in case, but creating an active collection that is relevant to the diverse communities that we are engaging with. Thanks. Questions?
Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. I'm just wondering here if we have any questions from the audience. Please type them into the chat if you do have any, or raise your virtual hand if you want to ask a question direct to the presenters. Okay, we got some questions. This is an expanding collection. How long would it expand for?
Until funding runs out. Believe me, it's a big headache that we had many discussions about. We're trying where possible to get electronic resources. Our biggest issue at the moment I left, was that a lot of the material which we are collecting is still in copyright. So even if we were to do a big digitization project, we couldn't possibly make it all available. So we were working on a huge weeding project to make sure that what we have in the collection is actually of use, that it's unique, that it is relevant to what we want to achieve going forward. But it is difficult seeing the language that you need to have and the subject expertise. And we have been quite hesitant to fully rely on our connections to the community, because they have a very high emotional engagement with the community. So weeding is a very bad word and they get very emotional immediately. So we probably will be working closely together with Cavall to make use of the offsite store facilities. We're expanding some of the shelving, and we're hoping that the publication industry in Eastern Europe is moving more towards electronic in the future.
Lovely. Are Eastern Slavic areas also included in the collection?
Yes. It is pretty much everything from, it includes Central and Eastern Europe, so Poland, Czech, Slovakia, and then everything east of that, pretty much over to Russia. We even collect some of the Chinese materials that in the borderlands of Russia, former Soviet Unions. It is a very broad scope that we're collecting, although we have our focus area, but if there's relevancy in the material, we would collect quite broadly.
Yeah, it's a really large area to cover.
Mm-hmm.
Emily is wondering how much work goes into your partnerships?
Deanna, do you wanna?
I would say a large part goes into partnerships, and where I guess it depends what you define as partnerships, but we are constantly collaborating with other teams, with the Ukrainian Studies Department, even the German Studies Department. It's a role that involves a lot of partnerships. That wasn't a great answer, Anna.
Look, it can be as little as having a quick email to someone because you have a question, but when you deal with the community, a lot of it is going for a cup of coffee or tea, going to out of office hour events in the evening, to community events. I know when I started over 5 years ago in that role, it was really hard to set limits on when you will be available for the community and when not. For Deanna, it is probably much harder than me because she has connections to the Ukrainian community. So it is not always clear when your job ends and when your kind of community engagement starts. But yeah, I would say, especially now that we have less involvement with the collection development, it's probably half of our time is spent on developing those relationships.
Yeah, thank you. Jennifer says, it sounds like a wonderful collection. Are you based solely with managing the collection, or is it part of your wider role?
I might talk to this if that's okay. So managing the collection is a large part of the role, but the Ada Booth role is also part of the research and learning team at at Monash Library. So as well as managing the collection, we also teach classes, work on just supporting students in general, and sort of do other duties that normal subject librarians would do.
Great. Donna is asking, how did you get support for the conference?
We were basically asked and we said yes. We're very lucky the board of trustees that oversees the benefaction includes the university librarian. And our trustees are very keen on getting that engagement. We are in a very unique position that I know not a lot of universities are in or libraries are in that our funding is generous. It's not without end, but providing our spaces and providing some catering, which is what we did for the conference, was very easy for us to do. And we got the support from the library because the library, one of the strategic goals of the library is to have more engagement, to have those international conferences on our premises, but also because the community is quite keen to engage with us.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Michelle is wondering, what are the challenges with managing publications in different languages, for example, acquisitions and cataloging?
That is, maybe we both answer this. It is, it has its challenges, and there's a big learning curve. Things are a lot different since the approval plan with Eastview, but publishing works a little bit differently in Eastern Europe. Definitely there are a lot more print books as opposed to e-resources. There's also issues with transliteration. So, Anna, you'll probably be able to speak to this a lot more, but acquiring older books in Slavic languages has been interesting because they don't have, you take over, sorry, you're probably better to answer this.
Like I said, the way publications and publishers work in Eastern Europe is quite different. A lot of publications have very small print runs. So I think one problem we have is getting items before they get sold out. Big thank you to Kaval because we couldn't catalog it all. We rely very much still, even though we have the approval plan, on Kaval with the foreign language cataloging to help us with that. Just to give you an idea, we have about 16 active languages in the collection. So that's 16 languages we need catalog in. I speak Polish, I can read Cyrillic. It is Google Translate is your best friend, is all I'm saying. And that's why it was important for us to partner with someone like Eastview who has all that language expertise. But it is very similar to what you see with other Asian languages or anything that doesn't use the Roman alphabet is language.
So does Eastview help you with the acquisition or provide records for you, or how does that relationship work?
So they have offices in Moscow, in Kiev, and across Eastern Europe. So these offices have agents that go out and source those publications for us. We have given them a scope and subject areas we want to collect. For some of the languages, they will provide us a full record. Others, they will just send us an item with a brief record, and these items we would then send to Cabal for full cataloging. We gave them the scope and how much money we want them to spend, and they have done an amazing job in that regard, and they are very spot on with what they're selecting.
Sounds like a great partnership. Graham is asking, are you actively transferring items into an electronic form for greater accessibility?
To some degree, we have digitized some of the materials. Monash is currently reviewing the digitization strategy, so we're hoping that that will improve our efforts there. Really, despite us having grown in terms of engagement and outreach, we have very little users that have any impairments that would hinder them from accessing our physical collection. So we've been quite lucky with that, but it is at the forefront of our mind. And we also, in terms of preservation focuses, maybe working with Heritage Trust going forward, making our collections more available. It is really, copyright is complicated, seeing that most of the institutions in the Soviet Union don't exist anymore. Some have been taken over, some have not. And to be honest with you, it has mostly been a time issue, because the Ada Booth Librarian is responsible to follow up on copyright. And I can tell you, for Polish materials and Russian, it's actually pretty straightforward, because the national libraries are amazing with the cataloging and the data they provide. But when you look into the Ukrainian National Library, they try their best, but they just don't have the funding. So the data they provide, researching when someone died or who the copyright belongs to, it's just not possible for us.
Great. Emily's asking, are you able to talk a little bit more about your alignment with broader organizational goals?
Yep. Deanna, do you want to?
No, that's right, sorry.
So as you know, for most universities, it's really, we want to engage with our users. It is really important that we do what they need us to do, and that's kind of where this idea of we're not collecting just in case. It might sound like it with Ada Booth, because we're collecting very broadly, but we're putting a lot of effort into ensuring that what we're collecting, like with the music collection, will actually be used, and not be used in 20 years time, but hopefully this semester or next semester. We work very closely together with other subject librarians to really understand what they are currently doing. We talk very much with our special collections team to understand where they're moving. And we are very lucky with the funding. So creating something like the International Fellowship, that creates immediately new relationships for our academics. Our academics are very engaged with us, because we're opening possibilities of grant money for them. They need resources to apply for grants. They need resources to have those conferences, to invite conference applications and fellows in there. So I think that's the best how I can describe it on a broader level. But yeah, it's always keeping in mind where the university is going, and not just collecting because we want to preserve everything. That's not our job. I wish we could, but that's some other institutions, that's state libraries and archives. So that's where we always keep that in mind.
Yeah, thank you. Anna is asking, are there Jewish materials in the collection as well?
Yes, there certainly is. I think our most loaned book last year was in Jewish studies. Yeah. So yes, definitely. And Monash Library does have Kippur Judaica, which is a closed Jewish collection, but we are continually buying books relating to Jewish studies and Jewish materials.
Yep, and I would say majority of the collection development we're doing in Polish language materials is related to Jewish studies.
Yeah, I can imagine. Cassandra is asking, what are your hopes or your wish list for the collection going forward?
A new wing, a new library wing.
You're not asking for a lot, are you?
No, unfortunately our funding is not quite as generous. I think what I would like to see having just left the collection, is really continuing with the fellowship. It was really inspiring having those fellows here and seeing how important we tend to forget, being down here in Australia, not having quite that engagement with the wider academic community in our areas, that yes, we can have impact, yes, we are important, and having the engagement with the community. And it always hurts to say it, but a lot of the generation that came to Australia 70 years ago is now at a stage of their life where they're looking to share the knowledge and the collections, and to be part of that sharing is an amazing experience.
Yeah, I can imagine. Does the collection include South Slavic materials as well, apart from every other Slavic region you mentioned?
Yes, we do have some Serbian, Croatian, maybe some Bosnian.
Yep.
It's not our main focus is Eastern Europe, but we do, or sort of, yeah, East Slavic, but we do have some South Slavic language books, if that answers your question.
It does indeed. Thank you very much. I think that was all the questions that come in up until now. Thank you so much for this presentation and for the Q&A.